Welcome to the deep dive today about acknowledgements. My name is Robin. I'm one of the co-founders here at Donorfy, and I look after product management, which is the art of trying to ensure that the product does what people want it to do, and working with the developers to make that happen. So this morning we're going to focus on the acknowledgements feature of Donorfy and show you what the system does today as it stands, and any particular screenshots, FAQs and that kind of thing that we come up with in support. We'll cover those as well. So let's just go through the agenda. We're going to look at what acknowledgements are. We're going to look at what they're actually for, how they work in terms of how you set things up, and then producing them on a daily or a regular basis. We're going to look at some related topics, or at least mention them in passing, because it does spill over into other areas, particularly what you might call a supporter journey communications plan, and the direct debit notifications for Go Cardless. We're going to look at some FAQs that come through from support, some assumptions that we make about how acknowledgements works and what you should expect from it, and some of the gotchas that we know people come across from time to time. Also look at how you can take acknowledgements a step further, and a couple of top tips about how to use it, and that should round it off. So we'll be looking approximately at half an hour or so in this session to cover those things. So first of all, what are acknowledgements in Donorfy? They're essentially the thank you notes that you can produce from Donorfy based upon either transactions or recurring payment instructions. So they're both moments in a supporter's support for you that warrant a thank you of some sort, whether it's a one-off gift or a recurring payment instruction on their timeline. So we offer two ways of sending acknowledgements out. One is by email, and the other is enabling you to do that through a printed version by post or by mail. So why do people need them? Well, obviously, thanking is a very important part of fundraising, and often people want to be thanked, or it makes sense to thank them according to the way that they give. So if they're sending in a check, it might be appropriate to send them a letter back saying thank you. If they give online, then a quick email to say thank you for that would seem appropriate. But they may have preferences that override that as well. So we'll look at how that can happen in Donorfy. In the digital world, obviously, people are a lot more used to short timeframes for transactions. So you'll make a donation, you would expect naturally to get some kind of thank you note sent back to you automatically, and that happens. There are people who say that's too automated and it takes the personal side out of thanking, but I guess that depends where you stand on that particular argument. But it makes sense in the digital world for that thanking process to be an automated process. But also, if you like, the opposite of digital, there's a more analog process for the kinds of thanking that you need to do for transactions that come in through the post. So checks will come in through the door, cash. You have to manually manage those by entering them into Donorfy and then calling off the thank you process to say thank you for those things is an analog process. So we're kind of a foot in both camps really with Donorfy, in the sense that you can automate your thanking through digital means, and you can also make it more customizable and analog for those moments as well. There's also this notion that a thank you note is in fact almost like a campaign in itself. It's the start of a program of stewardship, if you like, or a supporter journey campaign, supporter journey comms plan. Various people will call it different things, but it's the trigger for then communicating with them appropriately, not just once, but with an ongoing sequence of automated communications, normally emails, that emanate from that first action of giving some money or taking out a recurring payment instruction. So we will touch on how that can happen from Donorfy, because that works in conjunction with MailChimp, and we can see how that gets initiated. And just for clarification, when we're talking about acknowledgements, these are different to the receipt kind of transactional notes that you get from payment gateways. So when someone gives through a widget on Stripe or even go cardless, they'll get a transactional thing saying this is from Stripe, or this is from the charity with a logo in there, but it's from Stripe, saying your payment has been successful, but it's not really a full thank you with lots of good content in there that would inspire the donor to give more. So we're not talking receipts, we're talking thank yous on top of those receipts. So how do acknowledgements work in Donorfy? And this is the point where we split really. You've got two paths you can take. You can mix them, but there is the one at a time process, where if you're in an environment that is handling low volumes of checks and cash and manual payments, then you might want to use the one at a time process, which is going to enable you to produce on demand the print or the email thank you using the send document feature in Donorfy. And that has the advantage of creating an activity with the edited version of whatever you sent attached to it. So we'll demonstrate that in just a moment, but on demand using the send doc feature in Donorfy is one option there for calling them off one at a time. So your workflow might look like this. You open the post, you've got 3 checks in that day, you enter the check against the appropriate constituent, you go to the timeline, send document, modify the thank you that's come up from the template with any personal notes you want to make, press send, and that's all done there and then. So that no longer needs to be thanked. We have a template designer in Donorfy for you to design your documents in, and we'll look at how that works in a while. But also in the automated world, you can make those templates or those documents automatically fire when someone makes a successful payment online, or a successful new Go Cardless direct debit instruction is created using a web widget, or a donation comes in through a donation page. So you can automate your emails as well using those template designed thank you notes that come in. So that's the one at a time option. The other option is that if you're in a more high volume environment, or maybe you have a season where you have a high volume of transactions, you might want to use the bulk method of acknowledging, which is still using Donorfy's templates for email. But for those who want printed thank yous, we export that information for you to merge and print within Microsoft Word. So how does that work? All the thankable transactions and RPIs are queued up for thanking inside the Donorfy financial acknowledgements area, which we'll look at in just a mo. And that means you can get on with the process of entry of gifts. In high volumes, you can go into batch entry and start posting them and not worry too much about producing a thank you after each one, but they're all queued up, ready to be thanked in this acknowledgements section of the finance menu. And as I say, you can then send those across on email to each donor or by post. And we'll look at how the decision is made as to whether to send them an email or send them a letter in the next few slides. So first of all, let's go back to this template designer that we have in Donorfy that enables you to send an email or a series of emails to the donors who've given that day, and also letters. So the template applies to not only emails, but also one-off printed letters. So the template shown on the screen here is an example. So you would go into your configuration area, into documents, what are they called? Acknowledgements and documents. And this is my sort of one-off thank you email, which has placeholders within it for the various bits of information that you would want to merge into that to make it personal. So placeholders are various placeholders for the constituent information, like the dear name, the salutation, other things about the constituent that you may or may not want to merge into in there. You can also merge in a link, for example, to take them back to the preference center to update their own contact details, which is quite a nice touch sometimes in a thank you letter, just to make sure that you've got the right information. And it merges in the latest transaction. So when we go into the send document process in just a moment, we do that in the context of a constituent, and it'll know to pick up the latest transaction and merge that information in. So you can't use this to produce a thank you letter for the last transaction but one, or but two, or but three, etc. It will always be the latest transaction in their timeline that you're thanking. But on the basis that you'll want to be thanking as soon as you can, that shouldn't be a problem. Also, if you're sending a document, sending an email, or printing a letter in relation to an RPI they've just set up, then likewise, the latest RPI they've set up will provide the placeholders for you to insert in there. You'll notice one of the placeholders in my demo here is something called latest transaction acknowledgement text. Bit of a mouthful, but essentially that's a block of text that you can enter during the gift entry that could appear in the thank you note, in the acknowledgement. So I'll just go into Donorfy here and find a recently used donor, Penny Black. Here we go. And we will add a new transaction for Penny Black. As I enter the transaction, she's given £150. She may have enclosed a letter with it. I'm going to go into the more area of this transaction. And in the personalized text for this acknowledgement, which you can hopefully see in the middle of the screen there, I'm going to write in some sort of response to the letter she sent in. So thanks for your kind words about the recent campaign. We look forward to working with you in the future. Sounds a bit formal, but that's a note I'm putting in to this donation so that when we produce the thank you note, it will appear in the corresponding place where the placeholder is. So it's a way of personalizing the thank you note according to the covering note of this particular letter, donation. You can also put your images here into the template. Those images are not saved in the template itself. They're a URL to the image in the internet. So somewhere on your website, you will have your logos or your various brand assets will be there, and you just need to understand and find the URL for any particular image you want to display inside of an acknowledgement so that it can be displayed accurately. You can control the size once you've got it. So if it's enormous, you don't have to display it in its original size. You can reduce it. You can put a link onto it if they can go off to your website or whatever it's going to do. But it needs to be a hosted image. And also, if you want a different design or more fonts than our little drop down here offers you, then obviously you can get your web designer involved. They can use the HTML editor to produce a full-blown acknowledgement design, which is something you can then run with for all of your email acknowledgements out of Donorfy. There's quite a bit of power there, and they would use this source button here on there. You can also see there's an emoji in this little thank you email, and there's an emoji button there where you can select from your emojis, available emojis, and add them into your letter, into your email, as you wish. So how do we then, using the on-demand, one at a time feature, how do we then produce an acknowledgement? Well, we go to the timeline of the constituent. So in the screenshot here, you can see we've gone to Andrew Pritchard's record. We've gone to his timeline. We can see if we look down his timeline, we've got a transaction dated 17th of June. It's a bit late to be acknowledging this now, perhaps a couple of weeks down the line, but there you go. So what you then do is you click on the Add button at the top of the timeline, choose Send Document. As you do so, it's then going to ask you which document do you want to send. This is a list of all those templates that you've created, like the one we saw just now on the previous screen. Choose the template. It will load up the template with his information merged into it. And from here, you can choose whether or not to include an activity or not in his timeline that relates to this thank you note. And then you can click on Send Email, and off it goes. And this is the activity that it creates, email outbound. That's just a choice that's set up within that document template, the activity type of email outbound. And then there's an attachment there, one of thank you email. So any edits that you made during that process to the email, obviously you've got that acknowledgement text we looked at earlier, which you enter at time of gift entry. But if you want to make further edits, like adding a PS or something else entirely, then you can do that. That will be saved in this attachment, in this activity relating to that send document. Okay. So just quickly to mention how you would automate acknowledgements from a web widget. So let's say that email that we looked at earlier, thanking the donor for their recent gift. We want to actually send that routinely for anyone who gives online. And to give online with Donorfy, you would have used one of our web widgets. Your web designer would have integrated that into your website. Donors will come along, make their donations, and in the specification behind the scenes here in Donorfy of that web widget, so this is a web widget for Stripe donations, card donations, for this particular charity, with all the money going into certain campaigns and funds and so on. The bit that makes the acknowledgement work is the bit that's highlighted at the bottom of the screen there. Just move my cursor away, you'll see it highlighted in yellow, which is saying send acknowledgement emails immediately, yes or no. Switch to yes, which means you can be confident that that email will be sent each time someone makes a donation online through that widget. And that works for both Stripe and Go Cardless, so cards and direct debits. Okay. So now we're going to change gear and look at how we acknowledge in bulk, or not one at a time, but doing them in a batch, if you like. And this is where we navigate to the left-hand side of the screen, financial screen, look at the acknowledgements link, and it will show you all of the thankable transactions listed in the first tab, those that will be thanked by email. The second tab will show you those that will be thanked by downloading them and merging them with Word, so by post. The third tab will show you all of the RPIs to be thanked by email, and the fourth tab, RPIs by post. So we're going to click through here and just show what they are. So they'll only appear on here for a maximum of 30 days. So if you haven't come in here to then thank them, then they'll start dropping off the list if you haven't done it within 30 days. So that's a good reminder to make sure they're done in good time. You can edit the personalized text. So that personalized text I entered earlier on that person's donation would appear in the box according to their thank you. And you can edit that before you send it. You can change the template from here as well. If it's not that particular template you want them to receive, you can send them one by clicking on Send Acknowledgement, click your way through, or you can click Send All at the top there. If you click Don't Send, it will update them as if it had been thanked, but it'll remove them from the queue. And when you do send them, what happens is the acknowledged on date is set. So when you look again at a transaction, you'll see that a given donation or RPI was acknowledged on the date, whatever date it was that you acknowledged it on this screen here. So that's how they're presented to you according to the channel by which you're going to send them and the whether they're transactions or RPIs. So how does it know which channel to send them by, and therefore whether to send them by email or mail? In the end, it's whatever appears in the drop-down list on the transaction or the RPI in the acknowledgement template drop-down list. That's what will control it. So by this particular case, we can see one-off thank you email is selected within this donation. That means that template, which is pre-designated to be an email, not a letter, will make it appear in the email tab of that previous screen, not in the export to Word tab. So it'll be produced according to what's in that dropdown. How do things get into that dropdown? Because what you don't want to have to do is to select every time you enter a gift how they're going to be thanked. So there are certain rules in place in Donorfy that will enable it to default to what it thinks is the correct one inside there. So the first thing to look at are your settings. So if you go into your Donorfy, go into settings. This is if you're an admin. And in the settings type, we'll find transaction entry defaults. These are the defaults for the entry of new donations into Donorfy. So the defaults include things like product, campaign, fund, that kind of thing. But it also includes the default email acknowledgement template and the default mail acknowledgement template. Okay, so these are selecting from the templates that you've pre-designed. So the first step in your workflow will be to create all of your templates that you think you will need. Choose which ones will be the defaults, and they will then appear in the drop-down list by default according to the preference the person has. So it will apply one or the other of those defaults, email or mail, to this field, to this drop-down field, according to comms preference. So if I look back at Penny Black, Penny Black is a constituent on my database who has a preferred channel. I'll just make it look a bit more realistic. There we go, make it mail. So we have her mailing address. She said she's open to be mailed, and her preferred channel is mail. So you can see that in the drop down there. There's no email for her to choose from. So naturally, when entering a donation for Penny Black, it's going to default to not thank you email. It'll default to the mail version of our preferences in the settings, in the default settings. All right. But for somebody else, let's find another recently used donor. So Duncan Baker, let's see what he has. He has, I'll just change him to enable email, and his preference is by email. So if we now enter a transaction for him, add a new donation, check for £100, open up the more area, we'll see that the acknowledgement document template that it's chosen for him is the one of thank you email, because it's read his preferences and realized that of the two default settings, the email one is the one to apply in his case. So that's the how it will decide which one to put in there. You can, however, override those things. Oh, by the way, it will also respect the do not contact settings. So if it's set to do not contact, it'll be an empty acknowledgement box there, which means they won't appear in the queue at all because they've chosen to not be contacted for any reason. The overrides are, obviously, you can select from the drop-down box. So if in this case, this is Duncan's transaction that we're entering, if we knew we wanted to go away from that standard thank you template and use something else instead, then we can choose a different template manually. And if you're using batch entry for Donorfy, batch templates will override the default as well. So you can set a batch to say everything in this batch is going to receive a certain email, thank you letter, or whatever it is, because it's for a certain batch, and we've got our own template for that particular campaign, for example. And the same drop-down appears within the RPI. So the screenshot underneath was all about transactions. The screenshot on top is about RPIs. Okay, so that's how we produce them. I'm just going to go back and recap on that financial acknowledgements bulk feature again, just to show you how that looks, in case that message didn't come across clearly on the slides. So here in my demonstration charity, I have got a number of donations which are queued up to be thanked by email, according to the logic of how it decided email or letter that we just discussed. A number which are sitting in the awaiting acknowledgements by mail, okay? And we can see the previous downloads here that we've made in the past. New RPIs by email and new RPIs by download. I haven't got any in my RPIs download area. So that's where they are, and to send the emails, send all or send one at a time, or mark as don't send if I've decided in the end not to send an email. Then transaction download, be a case of clicking the create new download file. You can limit it to just those that are entered by me. So if you have a process in your organization that says everyone who enters a batch or whatever does their own thanking, then you can limit it to just the ones you've entered. But you can then go on to prepare the download, and it will download it according to your choice there. So let's go through some of the things that come through on support, some of the questions, and some of the ideas that people would like it to do as well, and we'll look at that. So first of all, when you're sending emails out of Donorfy, the mechanism it uses to do that is to hook up to your email server and send it through that. So it doesn't come out of Donorfy as such, it comes through Donorfy, through your email system and out. So you need to make sure that your email server settings are set up first, and there's a whole article about how that works and making sure that that's working properly for you. So make sure that that's enabled in order to send emails. Another popular question is that rather than sending a standard template, albeit with some merge fields in it, we want perhaps a different signatory based upon the value, or different content in the email based upon variables within the donation, such as which campaign it was for, how they gave, whether or not they've got a gift aid declaration with us or not, that kind of thing. And we're going to show you a way of achieving that in a moment using the printed Microsoft Word option. But that's not possible within a Donorfy template. So there's no conditional capability within the Donorfy document template to make that happen. But you can do it with an external solution like Word for producing at least your printed versions. Also, MailChimp will handle that for you. I want to design my on-demand letters in Microsoft Word. That is something that's occasionally come up. For whatever reason, the editor within Donorfy maybe isn't as familiar or as flexible or as powerful as Microsoft Word. Although you can get some nice looking designs in there, and using the images which you can incorporate, it can do the job. But that's something that's been requested. It's on the feature request panel and has a number of votes already. So we're looking at how that works. If I look at it from my product management point of view, that's something we have recently discussed in the business. So what you may have noticed is that when we're talking about merging printed letters, we've been talking about Donorfy doing that from within our own template for a single letter, but for bulk letters, it gets exported to Word. And again, that's a design choice in Donorfy. Donorfy integrates with other things, as you know, and that's generally a good thing because those other systems are the expert systems for doing those particular tasks. So we decided early on that we wouldn't try and replicate the whole mail merge feature within Donorfy, but we'd provide the data source from within Donorfy for you to merge into Microsoft Word documents. So that's the rationale behind it, whether or not that's the answer you wanted or not to that particular question. Another one that comes up from time to time is that you can't embed an image within your document template in Donorfy. They have to be hosted. That's correct. They're not stored within Donorfy. I think it probably could happen. We could store them in Donorfy. There is a benefit to having them hosted, which is that if through rebranding or anything else, the image changes, but the URL for the image stays the same, then your thank you letters won't need updating. Your templates won't need updating. But yes, images do have to be hosted, and they are then able to be incorporated into a template once you have that URL. So as we know, Donorfy becomes this gathering place for transactions that come in from not just batch entry, not just from your website, but also other sources like JustGiving, Facebook, Eventbrite, and so on. We don't typically recommend that you thank everyone from all of those channels, because those channels have their own particular ways of thanking in the first place. And anyway, much of the time, the donor isn't necessarily giving to the charity, they're giving to a friend who's got a page set up in JustGiving or Facebook. Maybe from Eventbrite, they're adding a donation to a booking fee. That's fair enough. That will come into Donorfy. But all of those transactions will end up in Donorfy as transactions on the timeline. And there's nothing to stop you producing a send document thank you for any transaction that occurs on the timeline. So it might be that you want to create a transaction list of donations that have come in from certain sources like Eventbrite and produce a special thank you for them, but leave the JustGiving and the Facebook, etc. alone because they've already been thanked in their own way. This is one that sometimes comes up. Yes, we can automate emails from widgets, and then some people will be of the opinion that those automations make it look a bit too impersonal, even though you've personalized it with a name and different things inside of the email in the placeholders. I think for pretty much everyone who thinks it's too impersonal, there are those who see the benefits of sending them out rapidly and in a timely fashion. So we don't have any features to for example, delay the email send or anything like that within Donorfy. But if that was something you wanted to do and work out a way to make it a bit less of a machine, then feel free to add that into the feature request, and we'll take a look at that. And how do we opt out of being thanked? How does someone opt out of being thanked? At the moment, within Donorfy, the only way that they will routinely be opted out of thanking is that they will be set to do not contact in their preferences. So if you remember on Duncan Baker here, he has a contact preference of email, but he may be set to do not contact by choice, in which case you can set that to do not contact, and that will prevent him getting an acknowledgement. We are revisiting permissions within Donorfy to be a bit more granular in that respect, and we'll look at ways to particularly opt people out of thanking, but not other things. So, but at the moment, that's the functionality of Donorfy. So I said there were some related topics about thanking, one of which is how to kick off the supporter journey sequence in MailChimp from within Donorfy. I'm not going to go into huge detail about that here now, other than to click on the link here and you'll see this link in your in a copy of the presentation. If you want to get that, we'll post it on Donorfy chat. But it tells you how to use your MailChimp integration to initiate a supporter journey sequence from within Donorfy. Now, what that means is when someone gives online through a widget, you can enable that setting. So if I was to go into my settings for my web widgets here and choose my Stripe web widget. Scroll down to the bottom here, supporter journey settings. It will ask you, as long as you're already connected to your MailChimp account, which supporter journey campaign, and these are just the sequence campaigns in MailChimp that you've already established. So the Easter campaign supporter journey, and that will then create the trigger every time that a donation is received from your website using this widget to initiate that campaign. And that campaign might look like a first email, or the first email could be a Donorfy thank you using the templates we've just described. But then 5 days after that, for example, that's when your MailChimp automation might kick in to say, whatever the next step is, have you thought about volunteering, or and so on. So that supporter journey can be initiated from that. So MailChimp supporter journey article on the knowledge base will help you out. And then secondly, the Go Cardless notifications. So if you're with Go Cardless and you're taking direct debits, you'll be aware that apart from thanking, which is something we've covered, and you can thank your new RPIs in Donorfy using the methods we've just described, there are some communications that are required by the direct debit system run by BACS in the UK. So there are some communications that are required to confirm that someone has set up a mandate, an instruction, an agreement. And you can leave Go Cardless to do that for you, which will create a Go Cardless kind of looking email and send that to the donor. Or you can override that with your own more branded, personalized version of that. You still have to say the legal words in the document that you send them, but you can use the override for Go Cardless notifications to take control of that process in a way that's probably a bit more personalized, a bit better, a bit more on brand than just letting Go Cardless do it for you. So that's a related topic. It's kind of a thank you, but it's a required thank you according to the direct debit rules. So I'm going to finish off with just where you might want to take this a bit further, and some other top tips. And really, it's just a couple of things. First of all, if you need to resend an acknowledgement that's been sent and have it appear in the queue again, then just remove the acknowledged on date from within the transaction or the RPI, so that it will then reappear in the queue. So you just edit the transaction or the RPI to remove that date, and that will come in. And then how we can use Microsoft Word to vary the content of your thank you letter based upon variables in the data. So this is one that answers an FAQ about how you make the letter. For example, you might want the signatory to be the CEO or the director of the charity if it's above a certain amount, or the content, the words themselves in the document. So what I'm going to do is show you how to do this, but there's a caveat around all of this, which is when the data has left Donorfy, we provide that data and you download it using the methods we looked at earlier, just to download your acknowledgements for mail merge. What you then do in Word is something that we don't support, but is perfectly doable, and there's lots of online help for you to find out how to do it. So first thing you would do, as normal, is go to your acknowledgements here in Donorfy and go to those which we're going to send letters to, and we're going to download them all. So this is opening up that CSV file that's just been downloaded of all the thankable donations, in this case, which are to be sent a letter as opposed to an email. So this is the data, these are the donors, the amounts, and so on. So what I'm now going to do is, in my Word thank you document, connected to that list of 5 or 6 donations that had appeared in my thank you list, and it's a letter which we've created with the logo at the top, and so on. And it's merging in information from Donorfy that's come down with that download file. So you can imagine label name, organization name, address, etc. there, the date. And then it's showing some rules in Microsoft Word. So using some of the variables in the donation download file, the acknowledgements download file, we can vary how it ends up. And you can add rules. So if you went into mailings, you could add a new if, then, else type of rule to make content conditionally appear in the letter. So what I'm going to do is preview the results. In fact, there's a shortcut key here, Alt F9, which toggles between showing the finished version and the codes. So Alt F9 is your friend when you're managing this kind of thank you letter. But now, if I page through them, you can see the content is changing. So I've got two letters in there. So we can see, as CEO of a great cause, I wanted to thank you for generous donation of £1,400. Go a long way to making a difference, and that's signed by the CEO. But the next one is signed by, it's a lower value, so it's signed by the supporter services team. Now, you might have other variable content there, like if it was for a particular campaign, you might want an update for the campaign shown in the letter, or other kinds of content. That's doable courtesy of the rules feature here in Word, taking the Donorfy data and conditionally putting text in there. So as I say, we don't provide training particularly on that. Partners may be able to do that for you. Feel free to ask, and we can refer you to training resources. But that's something that Microsoft Word is doing for you with the data that we've supplied it from Donorfy. So let me just revert back to there, just a second. Okay, so that was downloading transactions and then processing them in Word for you. If you are an own Azure user of Donorfy, which means you have a dedicated database, which is normally something that larger Donorfy clients would have, then you can eliminate the download part and include other variables in your data source for your merges, such as tags, etc., with custom views, and then merge that with the Word document accordingly. And there's just a screenshot in the presentation of the rules in the Word document that we looked at just now. That's it. Also, at the end of this, if you wanted to go through this presentation or through these slides at a later date, I've included this set of thanking tips from the Philanthropy Centre that was published by the Institute of Fundraising. Gives you some good guidelines as to what good thanking is all about. But I won't read through those now. You can read through those at your leisure. And that wraps it up. So thank you for listening, and any questions or comments on any of that, be pleased to hear from you.